Great.
Yes, now we are live. So, okay, let me hop over to my Facebook chat. I have multiple chat things going on. This is not user friendly. Well, okay, for everybody that's coming onto the live stream, welcome. We have Richard Grannon, aka Spartan Life Coach. So we're just going to do a question and answer and talk a little bit about his book, which I just recently finished reading, the How to Take Revenge on a Narcissist. So this is the first book, and wanted to bring up some really great points that you bring up in that book. So let me hop over to my chat here on Facebook. I have a ton of questions from people.
Cool.
For you. So I guess before we get going, I think everybody knows who you are, but for those who don't, tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are. And
Sure. My name's Richard. Hello. And I'm a recovering codependent. I'm
hi,
addicted
Richard.
I'm addicted to enabling other people in their abusivity. So I was a self-defense coach for a few years. I was an NLP coach for a few years. And I was, despite being qualified in psychology and NLP and teaching self-protection, I found to my dismay I couldn't protect myself from emotional abuse in my intimate relationships. And I hit a point in my life. There was like a critical point where everything went badly wrong, and I went completely doolally, which is a quaint English expression that means I went nuts. And I decided to try and fix it. So I spent a couple of years just trying to fix it and trying to figure out what it was all about. And out of that effort, the Spartan Life Coach YouTube channel grew as a project and kind of took off. And it was sort of done as a conversation between myself and people who'd experienced similar things. And we started coming up with some solutions and some ideas to help people. And then, boom, 3 years later, here we are. And yeah, trying to help people overcome narcissistic abuse and CPTSD.
Good deal. Good deal. I'm just curious. I have a lot of men that find my channel and they're going through all of this, and they tend to feel very alone in this. How did you even identify that you were being abused, and how did you go about, like, what was your experience with finding support or getting support?
Well, the Bro Code dictates, chapter 10 of the Bro Bible dictates that we're not allowed as men to ask for help, because it means that we're not really men anymore. And we're also not allowed to say that we're in pain. We're not allowed to say that we're the victims of emotional abuse, because emotional abuse is a girls only term. And so we're not allowed to say anything. So that's why so many guys feel so isolated, is because they're not talking about it and they're not talking to each other about it. For me, I did look online back in 2008, 2009, and I was a bit freaked out by what I saw in relation to narcissistic abuse. And I kind of thought, oh, this sounds like people talking about the bogeyman kind of thing. And I did pull away from that. But I did find a nice lady who was a good counselor. I interviewed 10 different people. I knew I needed help. I was like, I need help, and I must ask for advice. I have to get counseling now, because I was going crazy. And so I interviewed 10 different potential counselors, found a lady who I felt comfortable with, I felt could understand my problem and could help me. And I went for coaching with her, and that worked really well for me. And that kind of gave me the positive reinforcement to, get over my issue of asking for help, especially as it pertains to sort of emotional issues. Anytime I've asked for help, I've got a fairly positive response. Most of the time people have tried to help me as far as they can. So I guess at the tender age of, well, I would have been 31 when that happened, I realized that it was okay for me as a man to say, I'm in pain, I can't do this on my own, and I need help. And I got help from a lady, and I think that seems to be quite common, and it seems to be something that works. So I think for a lot of women who've experienced emotional abuse from men, they seem to want to get coaching from men, which may be an effort to sort of heal where that's coming from. I'm glad that I went with a woman for that process. So yeah, you know, I would recommend that guys definitely just get help. The Bro Bible's out of date. We need to update it. We need a new publisher. And you know, I'll add an addendum that says Richie says it's okay to be hurt. And it's okay. You know, I teach people how to fight. I teach men fighting. I lift big weights and make silly faces at the gym. So I'm a proper bloke, and I say it's okay for men to ask for help.
Yes, I like that. I like that. You know, and I think too. So you touch a little bit on in your book, but you know, so much of, I think, effectively handling life is knowing ourselves and knowing our own vulnerabilities and knowing our own weaknesses. And, you know, whether you're, you know, a cage fighter or whether you're a counselor, it's all about knowing yourself. So
you're actually touching on a really important point there, that the ideas that we carry about ourselves as men today, right now in 2016, and have done for the last 50 to 100 years, they're not historically the way that we always thought of ourselves. And it's not true of all cultures. I mean, many cultures, many warrior cultures would encourage men to be emotionally expressive. We know that the Greeks did. And we encourage men not just to be hard, factory working, mechanical, you know, killing machines and soldiers. They would be encouraged in other times to explore every element of themselves. And that's where you get the idea of, in Renaissance Europe, the Renaissance man. In the old Islamic world, you know, at the peak of civilization, of what was going on for them, it wouldn't, you know, yes, warfare was a part of that, but so was medicine, mathematics, philosophy, astrology, and the study of language and the study of other cultures. The Japanese as well. If somebody was too warlike, too wary, they would be seen as crude and not well developed, not well rounded. And they actually had an expression in Japan that the blade that is always out, meaning out of the scabbard, always displayed, eventually will dull. Eventually it's not as sharp. And that metaphor was just to say, you know, you can't be a rough, tough alpha male 24 hours a day. There needs to be a softer side to you as well. So it's a good point that you make, you know, that you sort of led me to there, that like that the way we think about being men today is not historically the way we've always thought about it.
Yeah, very true. Very interesting. Let me hop over to my chat here. There's a great question on here. I'd be curious to get your 2 cents on. Oh, cha. Where did it go? Had to do with codependency, and how do we know? Yes, how do I know if I've overcome codependency or am cured from it? What are your thoughts about that?
Okay. The simplest way to know if you've overcome codependency, if you're cured from it, well, first of all, you're never really completely cured. You're somewhere on the sliding scale of being better. But the question I would always ask is, can you say no? Being a codependent means having poor boundaries, and having poor boundaries means not being able to say no. So can you say no to yourself? Can you say no to your own negative impulses? And can you say no to explicit commands and implicit injunctions from the outside world? Do you have the strength now to say, no, with a smile on your face and be polite? No, thank you. Or I would prefer not to do that. Or I really don't want to do that, thank you, without going into an emotional flashback. Because for many people, they do learn how to say no, and then they start overcompensating by being excessively confrontational or aggressive, or they say no, but their voice breaks and no, because they barely dare to say no. And so the more neutral state you can stay in, and your capacity to say no, would be the indication that you've overcome codependency. The best way to overcome codependency probably would be to study the works of Sensei Pia Melody. A lot of old videos are up there on YouTube, and she's really formed a great system for explaining what codependency is and breaking it down into its mechanical units, and for overcoming it as well. But fundamentally, it's the ability to say no.
Mm-hmm. Good answer. Yeah, and I would agree. I noticed that too in others and within myself as well, with going from kind of being this people pleaser or a doormat, even though it took me a long time to really see that within myself. I just thought I was a very giving person. I thought, well, I don't have an issue. Everybody else has the issue, right? But going from being, overly kind, it's sort of like the three bears with the porridge. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's just right. And then overcompensating and then saying no all the time and then saying, well, no, this is my boundary, you have to respect my boundary, and becoming like this very aggressive boundary setting person. And it's taken a little while to kind of find that middle ground where, like you're saying, you can say no, and it's coming from, and I still struggle with it. I'm still continually blown away as to, I guess the ongoing process of it all. It's not just within relationships with a significant other. It's within relationships with every living creature.
It'll be in relationships with the state, with the government, with the media,
Yes.
with everything,
Yeah.
And just, we all have to remind ourselves as codependents and as people who have CPTSD, it's okay to say no. I have a right to say no. I have the privilege of being able to say no. And because I'm lucky enough to have that privilege, I have a moral obligation to say no. And I must say no, not just for my own good, but for the good of everybody else. We must be able to say no. And every time you say no individually or I say no individually, it's one sort of deposit that's left in the bank account of boundaries, of saying, of making it a thing that is possible to do, which is to just say no. I spent some time in the former Yugoslavia, and they were a communist country. And somebody jokingly said to me that one of the greatest socialist communist injunctions that they ever heard growing up was "you must." I'm going to try and say that in Bosnian, and I think it's "te moraš slušat," which means you must listen, you must obey, and it gets reduced to "you must." When you've had a lifetime of "you must," you don't know how to say, well, I want, because I want is no longer permitted, and I want becomes frightening. I want becomes alien. And the essence of codependency, the way that I managed to burn that out of myself, was to see it as an addiction and to see it as a running away. It was actually much easier for me to flop back into just saying yes to everything and obeying the injunction. And I once I learned to see that there was a kind of a flight and a self-abandonment. So I could just be like, oh, fuck it, I'll just do everything for everyone, just to stop the pressure and the grief that I was feeling and the shame that I was feeling for other people. It would be a situation that there were many other adults who could totally have stepped in and done something, but it would always be me. And I started to realize this is my addiction. I need to do this. And it's not about being good and kind, as you said. Like you said, you're a good and kind person. Well, I would say, well, I'm a Buddhist and I'm a compassionate person and I'm egoless. So this is my dharma. This is what I have to do. And then at some point I just said, that's bullshit. I'm kidding myself. This is an addiction. I'm addicted to sugar. I'm addicted to the sugar of just saying yes, of just going, fine, whatever, just yes. And then just giving myself and disappearing into the situation and disappearing into the givingness and becoming invisible. And some people, if you describe that to them, they go, that sounds like a beautiful spiritual experience. But it's not a beautiful spiritual experience. It's a kind of moral cowardice and a self-indulgence that's been imposed upon us from traumatic brainwashing in childhood. That was a long sentence. I should punctuate more.
I agree completely. So I'm a big fan of Buddhism, and that's been a recent aha moment for me, was realizing I was embracing a lot of different Buddhist concepts, kind of just, the path of most allowance. And I am just going to release judgment from people and situations. And there's a lot of really great principles within Buddhism. But when you have this, when you're filtering everything through this lens of codependency, it can twist these really beautiful concepts into something that's very unhealthy. And I think religion filtering anything, any religion of any kind, you know, it can cause tremendous amounts of damage in a person's life if they're filtering it through that lens of codependency. And I put up with a lot of things for a long time, thinking that that was what was, I needed to get rid of my ego, and this is what was healthy and appropriate. And it wasn't. It was just, I guess, a more quote unquote spiritual way for me to avoid saying no, kind of exactly like what you're talking about.
Absolutely. We could take any religion and do it. You could say, well, I'll be the best embodiment of Christ. I will endure the pain. And, you know, I'm a good Jew and I follow Judaism, so I'm going to be patient and I'm going to be tolerant. I'm a good Muslim. The fundamental principle of Islam is submission. I submit to the will of God. Whatever it is, you can change it so that it fits codependency. Buddhism is a particularly dangerous one, I think, especially in the hands of Westerners. I think for us, it's very easy to become poisonous, because unless you're raised in that culture with certain cultural templates and cultural coordinates already in place, it's actually really dangerous. Of all of the religions, it's probably one of the most dangerous ones, because we can go far with it without realizing the damage we're doing. With the Abrahamic religions, with Judaism, Christianity, Islam, you can see it. You'll be like, oh, okay, this is going wrong now. For Buddhism, I've seen good people go for years, and they just basically, they go down and down and down this hole, and they disappear up their own backside and then come out the other side. And before you know it, you know, Stephen Jones wants to now be called the Swami Bodhidharma Lotus Face, and he's just completely lost his grip of reality.
Right. Yeah, I think it's, and I still am a huge fan of Buddhism, but I think a lot of it, it's definitely an escape for a lot of people. I think religion in general can be an escape for a lot of people. And, you know, in religion, there is this whole spiritual abuse element. So people that are spiritual or religious it's that added layer of crazy making when you have an abusive person who's manipulating you, not only with their thoughts and their ideas, but through religion as well, saying, well, no, God wants you to do this, and if you were a good Christian or Jew or Muslim or Buddhist, you would want to do this too. And so we were actually just having this discussion in my support group earlier, and kind of trying to, and then of course you have a lot of what I consider kind of well-intended bad advice from spiritual leaders, right? Or different members of the congregation that will encourage a person, and they'll say, oh, well, you know, you can't leave. This is, you know, you need to give them another chance. And you've got this manipulative person that's saying all the things they need to say, and they're giving great lip service to pretending to actually want to change, but then they're not changing. And everybody in the church is now become flying monkeys for them, and they're pushing the person back into the relationship. And it's religion and spirituality really, it can add a huge layer of confusion to things.
A huge layer of poop.
Yes, that too.
In that context, what can start to happen as well is you get tribal consciousness kicking in, and tribal consciousness is, you know, I think is deeply ingrained in, as it comes from the hunter-gatherer days, where the number of people in the tribe, the more number of people in the tribe there were, the greater survivability we all had. So there is this very strong push in human culture when you have a group of, say, 30 to 50 people, which would be the kind of bands, the number of people we were traveling back in the day, that they want to keep everything structured and keep everything together. You know, all the Abrahamic religions make sense when you realize you're talking about warring desert tribes in the Middle East, and they need these laws to hold people together so they're not having sex with each other's wives, they're not stealing each other's property and cattle, and they're not stabbing each other in the back to you know, get whatever is gender cross they want. It starts to make sense. It's a bit scary in suburban America when a nice lady from the church or a nice man from the church, softly spoken, well-intentioned, a genuinely good person who's only following the teachings of Christ as he or she has understood it, is advising somebody who's being emotionally abused in a relationship, you must stay, you must forgive, keep going, don't give up. Because, you know, as I said before, you're now being the manifestation of the best elements of Christ, and what would Jesus do, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And they're doing it out of good intent. But at a deeper level, I actually believe it's tribal consciousness. It's this pack mentality that says, don't let this couple break up. Don't let anybody escape. the group. And what I advise my clients when I'm talking to them, especially when it comes to family, your family and your tribe doesn't really want what's best for you. What they want is what's safest for you and what makes them feel safest. So behind all of the advice and the double binding and the emotional manipulation you're getting, the person is actually trying to reduce their own anxiety that you're causing them to feel by trying to leave your abusive relationship. That's pretty twisted.
That's very insightful. I would agree completely with that. Especially, with these kinds of relationships, unless you're in it, it's hard for a person to fathom kind of what's even going on. So in their mind, if it's not fitting this idea of what they view as an abusive relationship, then to them it's not abuse. It's normal highs and lows of a relationship, and you guys can just work it out. But really, no, it's abusive, and emotional abuse, really goes under the radar with that.
I just had a meetup about an hour ago, and we were discussing this and just saying, like, if the person you're talking to has never been in a narcissistically abusive relationship and they don't know what narcissism is, don't talk to them. Don't tell them the truth about what you've experienced, because it will be isolating and heartbreaking, because they will look at you as though you just said you saw a UFO or Jesus' face in a piece of toast or something. It's very isolating, and you can't afford to do that when you're in recovery from a narcissistically abusive relationship. And it's a sad piece of advice to have to give people, to have to give out to people. But I'm talking from, bitter experience personally and bitter experience through clients as well. You can't talk to people who've not experienced it about it, because they will think that you're exaggerating or making it up. And as you rightly say, maybe the person you're talking to thinks that you just, the person's just being a bit annoying, or they've had a bad day, or you're just being a bit princessy or prince-like and demanding, and you just need to calm down and be patient. And they won't see it any other way. They can't. It's outside of their sphere of reality. Right.
I agree. I think that's fantastic advice. Especially with even a counselor, if a counselor or a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist is not familiar specifically with narcissistic abuse, and this isn't really a common clinical term either, but if they're not familiar with it, I would say just drive on. I think that's pretty solid advice, because if you've been through an abusive relationship, you need somebody who understands the dynamics better than you do, because odds are you're still in that fog and you're not even sure what you experienced.
I have nothing to add to that, because you said it so perfectly. All I would say is that somebody should timestamp that for us, and we should make that one of your clips. That was really good.
Oh, well, thank you.
But it is true. If the counselor or the coach hasn't experienced this, you really shouldn't go there. It could be crazy making.
Yeah. Speaking of good quotes, here's one from, and I'm sorry about the dinging in the background. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I cannot figure out a way to turn off my volume on Facebook, and
that's okay.
I'm getting a bunch of questions coming through, so sorry about that. So here's a quote from your book that I thought is absolutely fantastic, and it's probably the number one. And talk about time stamping and making this into a meme. Like the number one thing for people to take into consideration when they're going to be especially going to a therapist or a spiritual advisor, any outside person, is you say abandon sincere wait. I can't read my own handwriting. Abandon sincere communication. Yes, abandon sincere communication when communicating with the insincere.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that, because so many people, therapists especially, and again, in all fairness to therapists, they're only seeing this person, they've only seen him like maybe once or twice, the manipulative partner. So they're trying to untangle what's going on in the situation too. So, but if you know that your partner is manipulative, if you know that your partner is spinning things around and you're in a state of constant confusion, you're dealing with somebody who's insincere, and they have insincere communication. And so if we're coming to the table with this sincere approach. Like I am solutions oriented. I am team oriented. I want to get to the bottom of things. I want to fix the relationship. And our partner has insincere communication, and everything we say can and will be used against us and spun around. They're not solutions oriented, they're self oriented. And if the sooner we can realize that we're working from two very different mindsets and perspectives, the more sanity we can save. Because like you mentioned in your book, know your outcome with dealing with any situation really in life, but especially when you're dealing with a manipulative person. I thought you phrased that so well. So abandon sincere communication when communicating with the insincere.
And there's two levels to that. There's the level that you just said, which is like, it's pointless. You throw sincerity into this well, and it's just throwing it into this big, dark, deep well that has an infinite drop into madness, and nothing ever comes out. Mm-hmm. That's where all of your sincerity and good intent and love and the desire to be adult and reasonable and to fix things, you just throw it into the well of darkness, never to be seen again. Yeah. Wasted energy. And the second thing is that your sincerity and your therapist's sincerity and your desire to help is fuel for the fire of narcissism. They actually feed from that. You're giving them ammunition with every word that comes out of your mouth. I just want to help you. I just want to love you. I just want to make this right. Talk to me. We can fix this. Come on. Let's sit down. Let's go over this. Let's make this happen. All you're telling them is, all they hear, because they're not like you, they're not like me, they're like aliens from another planet, is, I'm weak, I'm weak, I'm weak, I can be manipulated, I'm weak, I'm weak. And as the narcissist goes, yeah, okay, let's go and talk this over, let's have a chat about this, and they give you this sincere front with the little smirk on their face, inside they're going, yes, I've got them exactly where I want them. And the therapist is on it as well. These two nitwits, they're going to try and fix me. Oh, okay, this is going to be fun. I'll just play with you, because why not?
Right. Right. And it's that lack of self-awareness of, for the narcissist, of like, well, they don't think they have a problem. So if they're going around thinking that they're perfect, then everybody else has the problem. The rest of us are just, they're emotional and mental, inferiors. So
we are inferiors. That's absolutely how they see it. And they see your goodness, your desire to morality, your desire to do right. And this is historical. They always have. They've always been amongst us. They've always seen it as the greatest joke, the greatest, folly, the greatest human folly, and the greatest opportunity for them to do what they do. If you think about any system, whether it's a business or a family or a relationship system, and if you take out good intent and the will to do right and morality, there is nowhere for the narcissistic personality to get in, because they don't have anything. They're losers, fundamentally. They're con artists and they're losers. They don't have anything to come to the table with. They need you and me and other people to be moral, upright citizens who don't drop litter, even though nobody's looking, and, help the old lady cross the road. They need that. That's fuel for them. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying we must do it. But just like the issue with the Buddhism, we need to do it now is the time to learn to set boundaries. And it really is like preparing for war. It's like preparing for, a self-defense scenario. It's a martial art where you go, I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be morally upright, because I know that it's the agenda of these entities to corrupt morality and to pervert the notion of truth. That's their agenda. If I do that and I become cynical and bitter, then they win. They're not going to win. So I'm going to be even more moral than I was before. But in order to protect that morality and to protect those principles, I have to be even more boundaried. And that's why if people are going to go for Buddhism, especially Westerners, I would say, start with the hard stuff. Start with Zen Buddhism. Start with stuff that is very much about rigor and discipline and very much a no fluff approach, where, in Zen Buddhism, if there's any fluff or anything that you don't need, or anything that is smacks of ego, or that you're carrying because you think it looks cool, they just cut through it. It just gets cut off. It sounds a bit harsh, I know, but we're facing people who have no morality whatsoever. And you ask anybody who's been in the military, who's going to win between two warring forces? The ones who are trying to be, oh, we're the good guys, we're the peacekeepers, or the absolute lunatics who are like, morality has no place on the battlefield. We will destroy you by any means necessary. That is the protocol, and that is the policy of the cluster B. Victory by any means necessary, at any cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree completely. It's absolutely crazy making, and they are incredibly dangerous. I think that's something too that people don't realize is, to them it is a war, and they are very self-oriented. And even though they might not have had a history of violence or physical aggression, their past results aren't necessarily indicative of future performance. So they have no empathy, they have no remorse, and they're very self-centered, and they're justified in any actions that they take. So it's, I think, really important that people realize that you're not dealing with a human being and how we know human beings to be, and any type of empathy or remorse or kind of really positive human emotion that we're putting onto the situation, that's us projecting onto them and onto the situation. This is not the reality. So it's so important that people see and accept this other person and the situation for what it is, and not what they hope it could be, because that can get a person killed.
Absolutely. That hope is malignant optimism. That hope is just rigidly and stubbornly holding on to the idea that things are going to be okay, when all the data and all the evidence tells you they ain't going to be okay.
Right. Well said. Okay, here's another question for you. Okay, would you say that an enabler or a facilitator is the same as a codependent?
Yes. People don't really understand what codependency means, I don't think. It's a kind of a software fault in the brain, a cognitive bias, where we tend to create false dichotomies. So people have got the idea that, I used to talk in terms of empaths, but I found that it was a lot of people who thought they were psychic would describe themselves as empaths. I was like, okay, I'll stop using that. Then I started using black sheep. Then I started talking codependent, and then CPTSD. So people created this false dichotomy: narcissist, predator; codependent, prey, or CPTSD, prey. It's not that. The narcissistic personality disorder is a CPTSD response. And a narcissist is always a codependent. The narcissist is dependent on other people's emotional responses for the sense of self. There is no clearer definition of a codependent than that. So sadly, this whole subject is a few clicks more complicated than any of us are really comfortable with it being. Mm-hmm. And you have to go a little bit further. And this kind of question that this person has asked, I really like this kind of question. It always makes me think of when I was a kid. There were these action figures. It was a failed business enterprise. It wasn't like G.I. Joe or something, or Action Man. But what they tried to do is they tried to create this universe in which the action figures who warred against each other were the 5 elements. And it was fire always beats water, water always beats wind. And you ended up with this symmetry. Like, if I pull a water card and you have a fire card, then we'll know who's going to win. The human brain likes that. It wants that kind of symmetry to say, here's a narcissist, here's a codependent. I'll study codependency, I'll be fine. Guess what, kids? Narcissistic personality disorder, psychopathy, borderline, histrionic, they're all complex post-traumatic stress disorder responses. They're all a response to trauma. And all of those types are codependents, I think, except for psychopaths, who are often counter-dependents, which is where instead of needing other people, they tell themselves they don't need anybody at all, and they shun all intimacy completely. And I think that depends on what type of psychopath you're dealing with. I think I'm not completely up to date on that one, but all of those cluster Bs it's a codependent personality disorder.
Yes, I would agree. I know that a lot of people out there, like you said, they tend to view, okay, narcissist, bad guy, codependent, good guy, and that a narcissist can't be a codependent, but it's they're very parasitic. So their form of codependency is this level of in order to get their needs met, they have to take in order to get their needs met. Whereas codependents, we tend to give in order to get our needs met. But it's the same needs that we're both trying to get met. It's kind of like, reminds me of Superman. Do you remember the Superman from the comic books? There was Superman, and then there was like Bizarro Superman. Do you remember that? And it was like Superman, but it was like the dark version of Superman. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, it's the same concept, but one goes this way and then one goes this way, and it's one is.
If you think about it, I mean, it makes us cousins. We're in the same family as cluster Bs, as enabling codependents. They're alien and they're confusing, but they're not that alien. And we're both of us in this dance trying to get our needs met in a childish, non-adult, non-boundaried way, in a non-direct, non-honest way. It's still a manipulation. Okay, they're aggressive and exploitative and they hurt people, which an enabler would be terrified of doing. But we're still trying to get our needs met via the back door, via some sort of a manipulation, and not just saying, hey, I just want to be honest with you. This is what I need right now. This is what I want. Can I have that, please?
Right.
And just being calm and sitting in that and knowing that you have the right to do that. It's a hard lesson to learn for a lot of us, just to ask directly and openly for exactly what it is that we want.
Yes, and it takes lots and lots of practice doing it, as I have been learning.
And courage.
And courage. Yes, and courage. And
courage, Frodo.
Yes, especially if our identity is wrapped up in it. It's tough. Let me get some more questions here because I've got a lot of them coming through.
Sure.
Why do narcissists seem to get along so well with other narcissists? How does this feed them?
They only seem to. So a narcissist will clump together, they'll couple up, they'll join together in groups whilst they are feeding each other's narcissism. A narcissist knows what a narcissist needs. I'm not going to say they're engaging in a circle jerk because that would be crude. I'm going to try not to swear on your channel. But that basically becomes what it is. It's about the narcissistic suppliers, about the indulgence of the ego. And yeah, they will quite comfortably and very skillfully indulge another narcissist's ego, knowing exactly what a narcissist loves to hear. That's part of their codependency. They too can be people pleasers, and they too can be, extremely struggle with boundaries. This is another thing where it doesn't fit that, the Superman universe, the elements of these action figures universe. It doesn't fit that because narcissists are extremely susceptible to narcissistically abusive relationships. That's mind-bending. I've seen that happen. I've seen somebody who's a classic, overt, somatic narcissist get completely sucked in by a covert, borderline narcissist, and he ended up marrying her. Now, he's from the book. He's textbook for overt, alpha male somatic narcissism. Hook, line, and sinker, he got sucked in by a classic textbook, borderline, vulnerable narcissist. So, yeah, that can happen. I forgot the question because I was talking too much.
No, I think you answered it, actually. The question had to do with why do narcissists seem to get along so well with other narcissists? Oh,
yeah, sorry. The thing I wanted to say about that, I surprise myself sometimes. The thing I wanted to say about that is it will work for a while. They will flock together. You'll see it in religious groups. You'll see it in business. They could be best friends. At some point, though, the thing with narcissism is there is a megalomania to it. Megalomania is not a psychological term that you hear used. It's not as popular as it used to be in the 50s and 60s. But the megalomania means it's the Highlander principle. There can be only one. And one day, that narcissist is going to reflect on the assets and the power and the status of his narcissistic friend, and he's going to kill him. Or maybe physically if they're gangsters, I guess. That has to... the nature of a cluster B intimate relationship is always turbulence. So one day, somewhere down the line, you keep watching them over a long enough timeline, their true tendencies are going to manifest, and they'll turn on each other. They have to, because there can be only one.
Right. I like that. I like the Highlander reference. I used to love that show.
That's cool, isn't it?
Duncan MacLeod from the Clan MacLeod. Yes.
That's an amazing Scottish accent.
Yeah, that's awful. I just offended Irish or Scottish people everywhere. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that. Okay, let's see. I've got some more questions here. One wants to know, how do you teach, or how can people be okay with being alone and not need others in their life to feel like you matter or that you are worthy?
That's a tough question.
That is a tough question.
Can I stall and go and get my power lead? Can you try and answer that, and then I'll tag team after you. I'm going to get my
Sure.
power lead because my battery's dying.
Sure. Let's see. Okay, so how do you become okay with being alone? I think getting in touch with yourself and identifying things that you enjoy doing. So just because you're not in a relationship doesn't mean that you just need to sit at home, on the couch all day twiddling your thumbs. So finding what hobbies you enjoy, what do you enjoy? And a lot of people, I think, when they get out of a relationship, especially if with a narcissist, that's kind of consumed their whole identity. If you've made this other person your whole life and you've given up your friends, you've given up your hobbies, you've given up everything that you love in an attempt to keep this relationship together, to keep your partner happy, then it can really be this process of rediscovering, like rediscovery and rediscovering who you are and what you're about. So, starting from that place, it's, I think, paying attention to how you feel and doing what makes you feel good. So
I'd add to that. I'll let you cough and I'll talk.
Okay.
When it comes to aloneness, I always want to know why it is that people don't want to be alone, and when they realize that they didn't enjoy being on their own. It's a tendency of modern culture as well. Louis C.K. did a bit about this, about just saying, just put your phone down and be alone for a second. And he pointed out, if you drive around, you'll see loads of people are texting whilst they're driving because they can't stand just being on their own and being inside their own heads, even for just a second. And he said that he did it once, and he ended up pulling over to the side of the road and crying. And he actually had, in just that little bit of space that he gave himself, he managed to have a really healthy therapeutic incident where some grief in that space, some grief came up, some grief that otherwise would have been suppressed or, smushed down under a load of cyber nonsense and Facebook updates. And it permitted him the time and the space to actually cry and experience something that needed to be experienced. Don't run from pain. Don't run from pain. If it makes you feel sad to be alone, if it makes you feel anxious to be alone, then sit with the sadness and sit with the anxiety and get to know yourself and be like, oh, that's weird. What am I feeling right now? And you can say it out loud because you're on your own. You can say, well, I feel sad. That's a very empowering experience, to sit on your own in a room and feel sad and then say the words out loud. I feel sad, or I feel anxious. Why do I feel anxious? So I tend to assume, I've found it useful to assume that the emotions that we feel, even the negative emotions that we feel, have a positive intent, and that they're trying to tell you something that is good for you and that could really help. Even if it's anxiety or a PTSD response, the intent, even if it's misguided, is usually going to be to keep you safe and keep you away from danger. So what is it? What is it, man? What is this sadness? What is this grief? Is it something specific that you can think of, or is it just a general feeling of grief? Do you need to sit and cry? Do you need to sit and question the direction of your life? Is it that you feel trapped? Is it that there is something you've just not dealt with, a conflict that you need to have that you're avoiding? Where's it coming from? So when people say that they're scared of being on their own, I tend to think that there's a little emotion there that they're avoiding. And over time, as your relationship with yourself improves, you will look forward to being on your own. You'll enjoy being on your own because it's, you can relax and you don't have to tend to anybody else. There's nobody else there, and you can just chill out and just be you on your own. It feels pretty good.
Yes, I would agree completely. Okay, here's.
Hope that helped.
I have another question here for you. Does the narcissist ever become codependent when the victim is ready to leave? Because that's what seems to be happening right now. Now he's ready to change now that I'm almost on my own. So what is that about, do you think?
I hear what you said in the argument we had the other day, and I thought about me and how I've been living my life, and I really should go to therapy. I'm such a dick. Don't leave. I'm so sorry. I will go to therapy this time. I'm never, honestly, I understand now. I didn't understand before, but now I do. This time I understand. Yeah, we've all played that game before. He's not becoming a codependent. What's happening is, the questioner, you're nearly there. Your map is a little skewed. So you have narcissistic elation. So I'm a narcissist and I feel good. My plans have come to fruition. I have multiple sources of supply. They're flowing. Everything is great. My girlfriend, who is my emotional dustbin, my emotional punch bag, where I project all of my negativity. It's like she's my appendage who I abuse because I am entitled. The normal rules of morality don't apply to me. I need her. She's my favorite little punch bag. And if she leaves, I panic because the narcissistic borderline personality disorder cluster B fears abandonment more than anything else. All of their strategies and everything they do comes that they're joyless creatures. They're miserable, chaotic creatures because all they do is run away from guilt and shame or run away from abandonment. Their entire lives are spent running. They're runners. They're total losers who've got nothing really within them. So they can't experience joy like a normal human being. So you say to him, dude, finally, I'm sick of this. I'm really going to go. And he sees that you mean it. That's when he goes into narcissistic depletion. Now we have a depressed, like one's a big bloated bag or a big bloated leech, and he's full. That's narcissistic elation. I feel good. Then it's a saggy sack. Oh no, don't leave me. I'm sorry. And they'll say anything. They'll say anything as long as you don't leave. But the second you put your bag down, the second you kick your shoes off and say, okay, well, we'll try again, he's going to feel good and go back into a narcissistic elation. And just like a machine, like the bellows on a machine, on an engine, once he's full again, he's going to go right back to what he was doing before. So it's not that he's become a codependent. It's that you're dealing with somebody who's probably like an overt narcissist when he feels good, and a covert or vulnerable narcissist / borderline when he's feeling depleted. And he's just, if you come out of your situation, imagine you're not you, and imagine you're viewing it from above, and you just look at it as a system. It's an engine of human interaction. It's a system that's playing out in front of you. What's the end goal every time? Is it not to get you to shut the F up and go back to sleep and keep doing what he wants you to do and what he has been doing the entire time you've been together? You're probably nodding and going, oh God, yes, because it's true. That's what they do. That's what happened to me. And I fell for it. It's different when a man does it than when a woman does it. There's slight cultural differences and gender differences, but it's the same message. Dude, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Just go back to sleep and be a good zombie. So yeah, you're seeing his vulnerability, but don't mistake it for genuine sadness or genuine remorse. It is the state of anxiety the cluster B personality goes into when they think that they're losing control and when they think they're being abandoned.
Do you think that, great answer. Do you, kind of what you're saying earlier, that you think all of the cluster B disorders are related to some sort of trauma. Do you think that there's any type of, like, does genetics or heredity play a role in it at all, do you think?
I don't, but people who I respect do. A few people say that they're convinced that there's a genetic factor in this. Whenever it comes to questions of psychology, I always consciously adopt the side of the debate that says it's all nurture, it's all environmental. And what I like to do, rather annoyingly, is remind everybody that there is not one scrap of scientific evidence to date that proves that any of your personality is due to genetics. Your genetics, as far as we know to this moment, your genetics are not interested in whether you prefer vanilla or chocolate ice cream, or in whether you're a narcissist or a codependent enabler. Your genetics really might not be interested in that at all. So that tends to be the way I answer these kinds of questions. But I'm open to the possibility that one day they can say, yeah, you know, it's in the blood, it's in the DNA. I don't know. I find all that stuff a bit like superstitious.
Mm-hmm.
Genetic determinism leads to racist ideas like all white people from Liverpool like to steal things and get girls pregnant and not hang around for the birth of their children, and they're on benefits and they're lazy. You know, there's a lot of, you know, I get things said about whether descendants of Irish people. And so they'll be like, oh, Tinkers, you know, people from Liverpool are da 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 da. And I'm like, you know, you got to cross-reference. There is a behavior pattern there, but also many people from Liverpool, the standard of education is low, the standard of the economic scenario is low. Maybe people from low-income areas are more criminal. Ah, okay. So whenever I see evidence where people go, look, there's a genetic description for why people behave this way, I'm always like, are you looking at all the factors? Humans are very complex, and we respond to the environment in extremely intricate and complex ways. And little tiny changes in the environment can have a huge impact on people's behavior. So I consciously choose to adopt the side of the argument that says, no, there's no evidence yet that your genetics is going to have an impact on your personality in that sense.
Yeah. My take on it is because I have known a handful of cluster B people over the years. I've been friends with them, I've dated them, and they've been with my family. And it's interesting to me how you can have a family with, let's say, you know, 2 or 3 children, and then they've got 2 that are fine, they're well adjusted. You know, they may have some issues here and there, like we all do, but they're not cluster B. And then you have that 3rd child who is like cluster B, and they've been problematic since they were probably an infant.
Are they always the 3rd child?
No, sometimes, I mean.
So with what you just said there, my brain always goes back to my side of the argument, which is when it is the 3rd child or the youngest child, there is evidence and research that's been done that would be suggestive of how that creates narcissism. In some schools of family therapy, the youngest child is called the fool because they're the one who's the baby, silly. The brothers and sisters had to take care of them. And I can think of 2 people who I've known since I was from childhood who are textbook for narcissism, and they're both the youngest people in their family. They're both from Asian families, and one Indian, one Chinese, and they're both male. And so all of these cultural factors play into how the youngest male in that family would be treated, how males are treated in that culture, what is expected of them, and most importantly, what is not expected of the youngest of the litter. Remember, parents as well, they're getting older. So by the time I'm on my 4th or 5th child, maybe I'm just a lot more chilled out by the whole parenting process, and maybe I just like some peace and quiet by now, I dare to suggest. Maybe I kind of employ my other children, they will become enablers, to do the parenting for me, the bits I can't be bothered to do anymore because I'm tired now.
Oh, let's see. I think our video just froze up here. And I don't know why. So, let's give it a second. I can't tell if it's frozen for everybody or if it's just frozen for me. Richard, are you still here? Well, there.
I killed the internet by talking too much. So I don't know if that just carries on right from where we left off, but yeah, that's what I look at is when people say raised in the same environment in the same way, you the way the parents treat is and I think we're going to see narcissism mutation or something.
Oh, are you there? I'm getting a lot of static and a very scary robot sounding voice. That's just awful. It's the things nightmares are made of.
Can you hear?
I keep talking. Yeah, still really scary, unsettling robot voice. Okay.
Can I come back?
Okay. Okay, so Richard is going to try to reconnect here, hopefully not with the scary machine sounding voice. That I'm sure I'll be hearing later tonight when I'm sleeping. So actually the next question that I wanted to bring up is on how to deal with nightmares. So hopefully Richard will be back soon and he can give us his opinion and thoughts on how to deal with nightmares, because that is a very common issue with a lot of people. So we'll just give him a few seconds here. I guess in the meantime, before he rejoins us, I can just, oh, yep, here he is. Hello?
Hello?
Hello! Okay.
Is that better?
Yes, you sound human. Fantastic.
Hello.
So, okay. So we have another question for you. I was saying it was ironic timing due to the scary machine sounding voice that you had for a little while there. But somebody wants to know, how do you deal with nightmares? What kind of strategies or tips can you give people to deal with nightmares during that initial CPTSD phase?
Don't, yeah, you said, I struggled really badly with nightmares for a long time afterwards. So my first tip is be careful how you frame it. So I framed it as, if I still dream about her, and I dream about her in a relationship context, and I wake up feeling bad that I'm not with her, then that means I'm not progressing and I'm not healing. The opposite is true. So I recommend that everybody have a little study of dream psychology. Use dreamhawk.com. That's proper psychological interpretations, not superstitious gibberish like if you dream of water, then somebody will give you 3 pennies or something. It's Jungian. I think he uses a lot of Jungian psychology. It's really good stuff. Go and analyze the dream. Go and look at the dream, and treat dream analysis as a form of parts therapy, where you honor that part of yourself. I went a little bit Louise L. Hay there. Honor the part of yourself that's speaking to you. Honor that part of yourself that is giving you a message. These dreams, especially if they're recurrent, they're messages from the unconscious. Analyze the dream, analyze the symbols of the dream, and see exactly what is being said. Some people's dreams are really clear. Like they'll dream of the narcissistic ex turns up and they're Satan with horns, and they're like, haha, I've come to kill you. Or they're stepping on their face with like a jackboot, going, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you comfortable with my boot on your face? Others can be a bit more subtle. You usually get a lot of water in the dream because of the emotion. Water represents emotion, so you might dream of tidal waves or tsunamis or drowning or of meeting your ex on a boat or something like that, because there's a lot of very, very intense emotion that just completely flows over you when you think about this person. So that would be my first sort of tip. And the second thing is to remember that this is part of the grieving process, and having been bitten by the narcissist vampire, you now have a bit of that zombie virus, and you kind of have to sweat it out. In medieval times, we would call this purging, It needs to come out of you, and you're unconscious with these very emotional, very graphic, very vivid and upsetting dreams. You can think of it almost as like a vomiting process. It feels sick, and it's trying to get that poison out of you. And it's an explosive, like when you vomit, when you feel sick, it hurts, and afterwards you feel dirty and you might cry a little bit. So there isn't like a clean, health and safety ordained way of doing the healing process. It tends to be a bit messier than we would really like, and this is one of the things that you need to go through. But your unconscious is really trying to clear that process. So don't suppress the dreams. Don't hope that the dreams stop. Let them be expressed, and sweat it out. You do need to be tough. You need to be like a pit bull, and just hold on for a few months. You're going to shake. You're going to sweat. You're going to experience pain. You're going to vomit and all the rest of it. But go through it. There is no way out but through, and you'll be a stronger person on the other side.
Yes, I agree completely. It's a totally normal response and reaction to a very abnormal situation, and I get it. I mean, I was there. It's so unpleasant and it's so painful. And I remember waking up either screaming or just sobbing. I mean, I've never had dreams that were that emotionally intense, and it really is awful, but they do fade with time. And I maybe once or twice a year have a dream like that, but there's not that emotion there anymore. So, it is, like you said, it's part of the healing process, and to just embrace it for what it is and try to ride through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll learn a lot about dream psychology, which is cool. If you keep studying it, then your friends will be asking you, oh, I dreamt about my teeth falling out. What does that mean? And you can be like, well, I read on this website, It's useful to know. It's useful to know. The unconscious is talking to you, and it does seem to be a storehouse of a kind of a timeless wisdom. Which was how Jung saw it. And I do think it is useful to take cues and signals from the unconscious. And when you do, those dreams will stop. This is true of not just narcissistic abuse, but any recurring dream. Like, you need to do something about it until the dream stops recurring. Take an action, see somebody, talk to somebody, whatever it is that the dream is telling you to do, you must do it.
Yes. Yes, I agree completely. See, I'm scrolling through here. So kind of off topic, but back to your book, the How to Take Revenge on a Narcissist. And after this video is done and I put it on my YouTube channel, for those of you watching this, I will put a link down below to where you can get Richard's book if you haven't read it. It's a very concise read. It's a quick read, and it's very interesting. I don't think I've ever come across anything on narcissism that even remotely comes close to what you have in your book. And I like how you wrote it from a perspective where you use a lot of humor and you bring a lot of lightness to a very dark and heavy topic, which is very refreshing, because we have to be able to laugh a little bit at this.
That was the idea, was to give people a title that would lure them in, that would lure in the truly angry and the truly bitter, and be like, you don't want me to lecture you and be like, hey, you should forgive. And I'm like, come here. I know what it's like. Come over here. Mm-hmm. We're going to get revenge. We're totally going to get revenge. I'm going to show you how to do it. And then just getting the arm around them and then just leading them like to a place where maybe they can laugh about it and they can feel empowered by realizing, with every revenge strategy I teach you in the book, it's actually like an NLP process where I'm actually teaching you what was done to you. I'm showing you their strategies. So you're like, oh shit, that's what happened. That's what they did when they did that to me. So it should be lightening. It should be empowering. And by the end of the book, I would hope, like, you don't want to take revenge. Like, you just want to move away. And as the book says, the greatest revenge, the most painful thing you can do to a narcissist, and it's all explained in the book why this is this way, is to just go and be happy. There is nothing that will torture them any more than that. If you key their car or you throw a brick through their window or anything, in their sick mindset, they're still special and important and unique. because they drove you to that. They drove you to be crazy and reckless, and they love the drama of it.
Right. I agree completely. Yeah, the best revenge is really just like they don't matter. I saw a meme the other day that was so perfect. It said something like, "I don't hate you, I don't anything you."
Yeah.
And yeah, that's like the epitome of the whole kind of gray rock strategy of, yeah, I don't like, I know who you are. I don't even care. Like, I don't even care enough to hate you. Like, I'm done.
Yeah. I got like some of that I got from Sam Vaknin, and because he did a video about this subject, and what he said in it is, if you can remind the narcissist that they are quite boring and everyday and normal, and they're just not that special. Everything that you do that suggests that their needs are the same as everybody else's, their entitlement to access is the same as everybody else's. They have to wait in line. They have to queue like anybody else. They're not a priority. It tortures them. It tortures them. The idea. So you don't even have to be, oh, you're the worst of the worst. Well, I'm still special. I'm sure Hitler went to his grave going, at least I was the worst of the worst. Whereas if he was made to feel like, you're just another dictator. Yeah, it wasn't really that big a deal. You probably won't even be remembered. That would have been torture. That would have been the ultimate, because then there's no significance whatsoever. And that really is, remind them how dull and ordinary they are. And they hate that.
I agree completely. And here's another question I get a lot. Let's do like 2 more questions, and then we can call it a day, because I know you've got things to do. And I kept you for so long last time, and I'm still so sorry about that. You were so tired last time. People wanting to know about confronting a narcissist and saying, hey, you know what, you're a narcissist. And how would a narcissist react if somebody were to actually say, hey, guess what, I'm on to you, I know that you're a narcissist?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said about sincere communication. You have to abandon sincere communication when communicating with the insincere. You've no idea, like, the sick, perverted, morally corrupt mindset, what they will do with that. Some people will rejoice in that. They'll be like, oh, I have a really special and unique and almost never diagnosed personality disorder. Oh, that's really cool. Oh, I'm super evil. Oh, that's really cool. Anything that lets them know that they're special or unique or interesting is narcissistic supply. So sometimes they won't be bothered by it at all. Sometimes you'll get complete denial. Sometimes, sometimes this, sometimes that. There is no personality. There is no human being there per se to receive information and then have a thought and a feeling about it and then say something about it. So it's only more game. It's the thing I always remember when I'm in communication with a narcissist, which sometimes I have to be, is the following sentence. It's just one more level of game. It's just one more level of game. And then you go, but then this, and then this, and then she said this, and then this happened. It's just one more level of game. But this, and we never saw this before, and we never saw that before. It's just one more level of game. When does it end? Never. It's a boundaryless personality disorder. It never ends. The game never ends. The game ends for a narcissist when you close the lid on the coffin.
Yes.
Like it's just a game for the
and even then.
And even then, they'll still haunt you with it. And there's no moral boundary. There's no temporal boundary. There's no spatial boundary. There's no familial boundary. It's not like you go, but this is your granddaughter. You're 78. Why would you? There's no boundary. It's just one more level of game. Stop expecting the snake not to bite you. It's like these old stories of the scorpion and the frog and the farmer and the snake, and they're going to do what they do. They're going to do what they do best. Oh, Mr. Scorpion, I'm a frog on a river. You're riding on my back. If you bite me, we'll both drown. Don't bite me. I won't bite you, Mr. Froggy. Halfway across the river, bang, he bites him. Mr. Scorpion, now we'll both drown. Why did you do that? It's in my nature. It's just one more level of game. It's just one more level of game.
I love that. I think that's so well said. And so if somebody out there is watching and you guys want to make that into a soundbite or a meme, that would be fantastic, because that's exactly what it is. And I think that concept for the rest of us, right, that are dealing with a narcissist, it's really hard to wrap our minds around that. And I think that's part of the healing process, is it's just these waves of awareness that wash over us when we start realizing, oh, the issues that we had in this dynamic with this person, that was the tip of the iceberg. Like like you said, it's game after game after game after game. Everything was a lie. Everything is a manipulation, and it will be until they're dead and gone. And again, even still, if they're that covert narcissist where they've snowed everybody, then they're going to have all kinds of like legacy things left to them. And it's a way for them to even like victimize people or re-victimize them from beyond the grave. I mean, I've seen this in my own family. Like it doesn't end. It's so crazy making how the levels of manipulation just keep going.
Well, this is why they write letters that you're not allowed to read until they're dead, and they leave it with the lawyer. And they love the idea that they can have power beyond the grave. They love the idea that they can affect you from long distances away. It makes anything that makes them feel powerful, they're going to be absolutely in love with. The problem for us as the enablers is, and the trauma for any human being dealing with this, is you're learning stuff that you probably wish you didn't have to learn. You'd probably rather not know that this was possible, that this was a thing that existed. And even when you learn that it's a thing that exists, you're going to stubbornly fight the reality of what it is, tooth and nail all the way, because it's too traumatic. It rips up all of our notions of romance and what love is and what relationships are. Actually, somebody just said something really good in the meetup that I just had. They said they'd read in a book that in overcoming a narcissistically abusive relationship, we have to learn to redefine love. We have to learn to redefine what love is for ourselves. And that's some profound chisel, my homies.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would agree completely. And it's redefining love for ourselves and redefining what our relationship is. And I think that's kind of this cultural construction, at least in the English language, we tend to have one word for love, right? Like, I love my brother. I love spaghetti. I love beer. Like, well, okay, these are all, I love my partner. Like I love my dog. Like all of these things, it's the same word, but it describes different things, but it's not describing the same type of thing. And so when a person's in a relationship with a narcissist, they're saying, well, I love this person. And it's like, is it love? Because what is it based on? If it's not based on this, open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication with respect and dignity and being treated with value, then it's not love. It's something else.
Sorry, I had to smile because I projected every attribute you just said onto a narcissistically abusive relationship, and my brain went, that's hysterical. The idea that it was about sincere solution, focus.
Yeah, it's not. Like it's we're using the same word to describe something. It's like that it's not. And then
we've actually gone backwards in that sense. It's interesting you point out that we have one word for love. I hated, we used to be, I went to quite a religious school and we were forced to do religious education. I didn't enjoy it, but I enjoyed some of the linguistic elements. And my religious education teacher said to me, in the Bible, in the New Testament, when it's being translated from Aramaic, when Jesus says love in the New Testament, he's actually saying 6 or 7 different words, but it only gets translated into English as love. So at one point she was like, over here, it's a word that means brotherly love. Dutiful, brotherly, sisterly love, we take care of each other love. Over here, it means love is in your passion for what you want to do in life. Over here, this is romantic love between a husband and a wife. And over here, this is the love of, and you think, well, I was 13 listening to that going, we should totally have different words. They're pretty different experiences and pretty different expressions of, and it's important. It's important to make those kinds of distinctions. In the narcissist vocabulary, love is possession.
Right. Love is not love. Love is control.
Love is control.
And you'd mentioned this in our last chat about, I think you mentioned this before we went live, if I remember correctly. And you summed it up so perfectly. You made the comment about how when we're finding out that we're in a dynamic like this and we're so confused, we lack the vocabulary to describe what's going on. And so just understanding that there's words like flying monkeys, like narcissist, like gray rock. There's this whole different vocabulary that people need to learn that's associated with healing. That's just knowing those terms, and that's a big part of it, because we're caught up in like this quote unquote normal terminology, which does not pertain, because we're in this bizarro, skewed thing of a relationship. So the concepts of like Buddhism or forgiveness or love or friendship or commitment, all of these terms are really skewed when taken through the lens of a narcissistic relationship, and it can keep the advice and the terminology and the concepts are good if you're in a healthy relationship, but they do not apply at all if you're in a narcissistic relationship.
Absolutely. And what you've been dragged into when you're in a narcissistic relationship is another reality.
Yes.
So I was talking to a friend of mine. He's just come back from Afghanistan. He did 4 years with people trying to kill him, and he was okay. He did 4 weeks with a narcissistically abusive girlfriend, and he was nearly ready to kill himself, which tells you just how powerful this kind of relationship dynamic can be. And he was describing how, this is not a guy who's used to describing his emotional reality. And he was like, it's like being pulled into a TV show. It's like being pulled into the matrix, this other reality where all the coordinates they look the same, but they're kind of shifted. They're kind of skew-if. And yes, it is powerful to have the words to be able to say what strategy is being used against you and why that works. And it seems to be the case that if you can name the demon, you can tame the demon.
I love it.
We do have this in our old stories, like Rumpelstiltskin. That story where if you know the demon's name, you know the witch's name, you can actually break their spells. Well, this has a long history. It goes right the way back to Egypt. What we think of as the names of the kings and queens of Egypt, we don't know their real names. We only know the fake shield names that they would give out. See, I noticed that you took your name down, which was a smart thing to do, because there are magicians out there trying to get you. So if they know your real name, they will. So Morningstar is like what the ancient Egyptian kings and queens would do. So you never know. We will never know what their true names were. We only know the shield names that the priests would have given them and done spells over to keep them at bay, because names are so important. To this day, there are people in British high society who follow the same rules because they're crazy and they think they're the direct descendants of Egyptians and that they have the right to rule over people. I'm not going to say who that is. People will be able to figure it out. But the names we see them being referred to in the newspapers, they're not their real names. They're following the same principles because they believe in this old superstitious magic thing that goes all the way back to ancient Egypt. Knowing the true name of a thing, though, is powerful. That's not magic. That's not superstition. That's psychology. If you can name what something is and go, hey, that's gaslighting. Now, I can't see gas, but I can smell it, and that's gaslighting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like the saying, knowledge is power, which I would agree that that's definitely half true. Knowledge is power, but it's the application of knowledge that's power. And so in this context, especially, like learning the different words and being able to specifically point out, this is why this is problematic, because for so many people, if you've grown up in a den of dysfunction, like so many of us have, this is very normal. And so all you know is that you don't feel like you have anxiety, you have depression, you've got, all of this stress and this tension is expressing itself in different ways. Something's wrong, you don't know what, and you're fumbling around in the dark, especially if you're doing what a lot of people, again, myself included, have done, of you going to different therapists trying to get clarity in this. But if they're not familiar with narcissistic abuse, you're still fumbling around in the dark, and you're reading all these self-help books and you're trying to figure out, what do I need to change to have my life work? And then you come across the terminology, you stumble across the vocabulary or the concepts of narcissism. And it really is just this holy shit moment where this light goes on and you're like, oh my God. And everything just starts making sense in again, like these kind of these waves of awareness crashing over you. We were like, and that makes sense, and that's why I dated that person and befriended that person, and and like this is why I don't like certain members of my family, and you're able to more accurately pinpoint it. But I think so much of it, and I'm so glad that you're doing NLP kind of stuff, because there is such a huge connection between our the language and our thinking, right? The neuro and the linguistic part of it all.
Yep.
And getting the accurate terminology down so we can more effectively express ourselves and what's going on and why we feel the way we feel.
Well, there's a few things I would say. Like, I think we take language for granted nowadays. But if people listening to this have any time for guys like Robert Anton Wilson and Terence McKenna said we literally live inside of language, to the extent that we live within our own narratives. We live within metaphor. It sounds silly at first, but if you take it to its logical conclusion, we kind of do live inside of language. So if your vocabulary is very small, your world is very small and very simple. If it's broader, your world is going to be broader. There are going to be more options available to you. Robert Anton Wilson wrote about this extensively, and he was good friends with Richard Bandler, who was the linguistic arm of the neuro-linguistic programming project being developed. Very big on language, and how neuro-linguistic program is just about how language affects your perception of reality. And if you don't have the right tools, if you don't have the right language, there are pieces of reality you can't even see. So without wanting to overstate what's going on here, it's people who are experiencing and recovering from narcissistic abuse. You're in a battle to reclaim truth, because truth is what has been attacked and corrupted every time in a narcissistically abusive relationship. It's not about you not being treated very well. Not really. It's not about bad things that happened. What does the damage is that you lose your grasp on reality, because truth has been corrupted. Reality has been corrupted. So what we have to fight back for is we're fighting for nothing less than our grasp of reality. And
yes.
You lose that post-narcissistic abuse, and you have that moment like in the film Gravity, where Sandra, this is a spoiler, if you haven't seen Gravity, why not? Great film. Sandra Bullock gets knocked off the satellite. Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, man. Okay. This is early on in the film. Still a good film.
Okay.
She gets knocked off satellite. You needed to see this in the cinema. It was terrifying, especially if you've got a fear of heights. And she's just in an astronaut spacesuit, and she loses the satellite that she's working on. It gets hit by a comet, and she just spins in space. She just spins because there's no air resistance. She's going to spin infinitely in space, and you see what she sees through the visor, which is the earth doing this, and then she sees her feet, and then she sees the earth, and then she sees her feet, and then she sees the earth. It's terrifying. And I remember watching that and being like, holy shit, that's exactly what I experienced for years after, because I didn't have the language to cope with it. And then in the scene, this doesn't spoil it, still worth saying, George Clooney comes along and stops her from spinning. And the whole film, if you get a chance to watch it, is actually a fantastic metaphor for the therapeutic process, and how you have to overcome the narcissistic abuse, then you have to overcome your therapist, then you have to overcome therapy itself, then you have to be reborn effectively. It's traumatic, it's terrifying, and you have to rebuild what was destroyed so that you can finally get your feet back on earth and then walk away and get traction. People who've seen this will be smugly smiling and nodding, going, "Oh, I know what he's referring to here." If you ain't seen it, you won't know. But check it out. The whole film is a fantastic metaphor for the therapeutic process. And I wonder if Sandra Bullock, maybe in the years before, did a little therapy before this film was made, because it's you can just see the whole process of what happens. You're going along, you're doing your job, everything seems fine, and then out of the blue, bang, this thing hits. And isn't every narcissistic relationship like that? Doesn't every story of narcissistic abuse start with, this person popped into my life from nowhere? Well, we
Hmm.
have fairy tales that start like that. The goblin you're the happy farmer walking along, and then a goblin comes up to you and goes, would you like a magic coin, young lady? And the young lady goes, duh, okay. And all of a sudden she's cursed and blah, blah, blah. They just pop into reality. That seems to be the way this thing plays out. And yeah, it's an absolutely terrifying experience. Without the language to describe it, you are just that astronaut spinning in space because you have no coordinates. The therapist or yourself on YouTube or people watching my videos or reading the books, then you go, oh, coordinates, coordinates, coordinates. Now I'm still in space, I'm still spinning, and it's still scary, but I can hold on to this thing here, and I can hold on to that thing here, and I can start slowly to rebuild and bring myself back to earth and get traction.
I think that's a fantastic analogy. You know, language is power, and it is how we define our surroundings. Sort of like, supposedly Eskimos have over 12 different words for the concept of snow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and like you're saying with the narcissist, it's sort of like you feel like you just got T-boned by
Mm-hmm.
this relationship you just didn't see coming. And that's how the end of these relationships often feel, like you were just T-boned by this person. And so if you're in therapy and you're with a therapist who might have read about emotional abuse, but they're not familiar with it to this level, they're thinking about emotional abuse in terms of just being called names. They're not seeing emotional abuse in the terms of your sanity being eroded by another person. You don't trust your judgment. You don't trust your reality. And so now, like you said, it's this you've got to not only heal from the ending of this manipulationship, because it's not even a relationship, healing from this manipulationship, but then rebuilding your reality, but having to trust yourself enough to know that what's real and what's not real, because for so long you might have been being told that you're the problem, and or that you're the narcissist, or that you have all this problematic behavior, or that you're too sensitive or too emotional, or your reality is being continually invalidated on a regular basis, and that is really hard to overcome, and a very isolating feeling. Again, I think this is one of the most powerful elements of NLP, is giving people back the vocabulary, but then giving them back even like more empowering vocabulary. So like, here are the words that we can use to rebuild your reality. But if we're going to have to rebuild it, let's rebuild it with the most empowering concepts possible.
Yes.
That's what really helps people to climb out of that black hole and really develop a healthy sense of self.
Absolutely, and these are the narratives that we are building, that we are creating, and to make another movie reference, it's kind of like Inception, to the extent that we get to build whatever we want. And so really, in my case with the Spartan Life Coach project, and it's similar to what you're doing, I'm trying to build ladders to help people get out of holes. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, I've had people complain about the fact that I swear in the videos and that kind of thing. I believe in what Marshall McLuhan said, which is the medium is the message. So I do that purposefully. I do that because I'm aware that communication is hypnosis. The people who are watching this and listening to this, they're in a light state of hypnotic trance. I'm in their reality. If I'm a scrubbed clean corporate life coach, a Tony Robbins, or I'm a very non-expressive counselor, I will not have the impact that I can have if I'm just being a guy that you might bump into in the gym, or a guy that you might bump into in a bar who just goes, hey, have you heard about this? Blah, and just starts talking at you and telling you crazy stories and making film references and stuff. It's necessary. All of that is necessary for the ladder that is being built to function. It's no good, because otherwise I'll give you a ladder where every step breaks. It's a very beautiful looking ladder. It's very pretty, but it's not strong enough. And what we need is robust solutions that work even when people are feeling really low and really depressed, or even when they're completely anxious or dysregulated. The solutions that we have to create, we do have to take hold of the narrative, and the narrative is only constructed of words. It's all language. So all that language that was poured into your head that did all the damage, Well, now we have something else. We have the language that's being poured into your head that's actually doing great things. And you go, wow, this is really good. I feel so much better. And all I'm doing is listening to words coming out of two people's mouths.
Mm-hmm.
That's a post-hypnotic suggestion. People feel better now.
Yeah, they probably do. There's a lot to be said for that. I feel better.
Good. There we go. We're all sat here shiny-eyed going, I feel pretty good.
So now, do you have any plans to write a book that more directly ties NLP and narcissistic abuse?
Yes. I'd like to do it this year, but I'm dimly aware that we're already nearly halfway through this year. That was the plan at the beginning of this year. There's a documentary that I'm involved with that you know about, the narcissism epidemic, that will be shot at the beginning of next month, and then will be out a couple of months after that. I'm also doing a master's degree in psychotherapy this year. I should be fine, right? I'm not taking on too much. and then I probably will hire somebody to help me to write that book with the NLP, narcissistic abuse, and looking at the effects of narcissistic abuse, and what the symptoms are of the CPTSD and overcoming that kind of trauma. Yeah,
Good deal. Good deal. Well, definitely let us know when that book comes out. I'm sure it's going to be an absolutely fascinating and very helpful read for a lot of people. So before, yeah.
I was just going to say, there's another book that's come out by Bree Bonchet, that is a collection of stories of narcissistic abuse. And before she released it, she asked me to have a read of it. It's really good. I recommend it. When this video goes live on YouTube, I'll post a comment with a link for it. But she said, we should have a narcissistic abuse awareness day. How would we do that? And I said, we should just pretend it already exists and tell people it exists and do things that make it exist, and then it will be a thing. So she suggested that the 1st of June be Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day. So we're totally going to do something for that. I don't know what it is, but I will send you some information. And I think it's a great idea. I think it's a really, really good idea, just to raise awareness. Yeah. So I don't know. We're going to do a thing that makes it more of a thing. We're going to thingify this thing.
That's how things happen, and things become
things get to be things,
right? Like, if you name it, then it's a thing, right? Like,
that's right. It's all in the name.
Figure all that out. Yeah. Very cool. That's exciting. I love the concept. So, before you go, tell people how can they get a hold of you, and what's your website and all that jazz.
The website is spartanlifecoach.com. There's a bunch of courses on there for people. I think probably one of the best ones to start with if you've been the victim of narcissistic abuse would be it's just called How to Overcome Narcissistic Abuse course. If they want to get hold of me, there's a contact form on the website, or the other good place to do it is on the Spartan Life Coach forum. That's another good place. If you write a question there in the question and answer section, every week I go through all the questions, and I've got a podcast that comes out. It's free. You can download it. It's on SoundCloud. So if you post a question on the forum, I'll answer it for you in the podcast.
Okay, fantastic. Very good. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was great chatting with you as always, and we'll have to do this again at some point. So take care. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Cheers. See ya.